Hello and welcome to hour two, the football hour for TNA Top 10 football edition. I think I'm redundant there. It is January 13th, 2025, and we just had the semifinals of the college football playoff, and we got one more game to go.
Playoffs? Did you see they brought that guy back, Jim Mora, for another commercial?
I did. That was excellent.
Terry, couple of items before we jump in because we got plenty of time tonight because there ain't a whole lot of college ball. Our man, Jaden Daniels, Washington Redskins. Don't ever ask me to call them the Commanders because most of the presidents in my lifetime have sucked in one way or the other. But Jaden Daniels leads the Washington football team to the first football playoff win in 20 years last night. Nice. Congratulations to him, Dan Quinn, and the rest. We love Jaden Daniels on TNA Top 10. Did happen at the expense of Baker Mayfield, who I'm a big fan of, and the Tampa Bay Bucks. But Jaden had a hell of a game if you watched it, Terry. I mean, it was a great football game between two very good teams.
Right, which is kind of different than old Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos had going on.
Buddy, Bo come out in that first series, 3 plays, touchdown, and I sent you a text message. I said,
"Oh yeah,
they booed that man out of Auburn."
Man. Oh yeah, so I saw. Speaking of that, so I saw this graphic which listed all the former Auburn players that are in the playoffs, and the comments were full of stupid Auburn fans complaining about Bo Nix being listed. I don't get it.
I don't understand the hate unless they want to say that they divorced him from Oregon. You know, they got divorced from Oregon.
One guy called him a traitor, which is just so stupid in 2025 to call a football player a traitor when they transfer out, when they got benched. I mean, come on.
Benched and literally booed out of the building. I mean,
yeah.
They didn't make him feel like, and I know you can't make it's football. It's grown up sport. You can't make everybody feel like, warm and fuzzy. But that's all he ever wanted to do was play football at Auburn and boot his ass out of the building. So, and then he went to Oregon and they had a pretty good run there, Terry.
And he's doing well in Denver. Yeah.
Yeah. Before we move on, I didn't put it in the notes, and I don't know why I didn't put it in the notes because I told you I was going to put it in the notes. Terry knows as well as I do. It was unanimous. It was universal. It was no votes needed this past week. Nicholas Lou Saban, the 7-time national championship winning head coach, is the first name of the 2025 college football Hall of Fame. I don't know, Terry, they needed a vote for that particular entry.
Well, of course.
I think they just needed him to be retired for a year so they could go ahead and put it
and it was exactly a year to the day since his retirement.
Yeah, to the day when they So
January 10th.
But Saban, very well deserved. You look at all of the wins, all of the titles, all of the bowl games, all of the pro players. His legacy, he says, was building men. And Marcus Freeman said the same thing in his interview. They wanted to ask him, what's it like to be the first black coach to coach a national championship game? And he said, well, I don't know if you're black or you're Asian or you're white. He says, if you're a leader of men, you need to be on these fields coaching these young men. And it was a very well thought out, but I think it was very sincere with that particular answer based on what I know about Marcus Freeman.
And I think Marcus Freeman may be my favorite coach in college football today.
Yeah, he's got the fire, but he's also so well-spoken. And like you said, there were monumental mistakes that he made early.
Right.
Bad coaching decisions. Yeah. But he hadn't made the mistakes again.
Right. He's gotten much better.
And I've got several things to talk about when we get to Notre Dame because I've got a few things listed here. I think we'll have a fun game and our listeners will appreciate it too. But yeah, Freeman is a very impressive man. So much, I don't know if you saw this, The Bears want to interview him after the national championship game.
Well, that's interesting.
So they're not, they've requested an interview, but he's not going to even entertain going to an interview until after the championship game.
Right.
So that means the Bears will be without a football coach until next Monday, and then however long after that, but it is next Monday, Terry. 7:30 kick on ESPN instead of, remember the days of like the 8:45 to the 9 o'clock kick for the championship game?
Goodness. It's like it's the Pac-12 or something.
7:30 ESPN, my man.
Okay.
Will you be watching the championship game?
Yeah, I'll be watching.
There's a lot of people said they're not going to watch because of who's in, and we're going to get to who's in shortly, but I wouldn't miss it because I think it's going to be a great football game, and we'll get there. So,
but first, we got a few things to run down.
Yeah, that's what
we don't
I'm
have
saying.
Nearly as many games to talk about, obviously.
God, no, but we did. I did make a fun little list, and I'll explain it to you once we get there. So you go ahead and tell us about payouts. What about payouts? Not to be confused.
I did start compiling a picture of payouts for conferences and teams, and then there's so much information out there. Some of it's contradictory. I thought maybe this is not the year for me to try to capture all of that. Obviously, the big ones are Notre Dame, $20 million to themselves, no matter if they win or lose the championship game. Since they're not in a conference, they don't split with anybody. $20 million. UConn made, because they're independent, roughly $4 million. The split for, I guess, the Big Ten made a little bit more money than the SEC in the playoff because of how far their teams went.
As of last week, every Big Ten team was due $1.1 million. I don't know if that number's changed.
That's just from the playoff, I believe.
Yeah. So, like you said, Nebraska, they made $4 million, for their bowl game.
So. Yeah. So there's also all that, and then there's all this talk about the two Pac-12 teams splitting $100 million from the Rose Bowl. And I'm looking for the original source of that. There's like 150 people out there talking about that, but I have not found. I don't see ESPN talking about that, so I'm going to hold off on that one. I'm not going to report it like everybody else.
Yeah, I think you would have a riot if Oregon State and Washington State split $100 million.
Right. So I don't know where that info comes from. It may be correct, but I don't see the information out there that speaks to that. So I'm not going to call it true or false. That's why I'm just not putting the numbers up. But obviously you can see a pecking order of the conferences. Big Ten, SEC at the top. You got Big 12, ACC are next. The Pac-12 is a weird wild card. And I thought the Sun Belt would be at the bottom, but from the numbers I saw, the Conference USA has slipped.
Mm-hmm.
And they at one point had some pretty good teams. I think they've been grabbed by other conferences as teams move out of the Big 12 and go to the Big 10 or the SEC. I believe they're going to grab some Conference USA teams. And they haven't really grabbed other teams to go in, so that they've kind of fallen, unfortunately.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, football's weird and it's different. I mean, we're gonna get there, and we could talk about it any order you want. I joke that Nebraska's the off-season national champions again, already declared, 8th year in a row. The Kool-Aid is strong. Number 6 on 24/7. Number 38 or 39 or 40, depending on whether you believe me or Terry, on 3. So I don't necessarily get how they do the recruiting thing. This is what I know. Terry. Nebraska looks like it's going to be a much better football team next year than it was this year.
Right.
100%.
That's what you hope for. Get better every year.
Yeah, and they're going to have 3 new coordinators, which is different. That doesn't happen, but they're going to have 3 new coordinators, one of which was on the staff. Dana Holgorsen. You and I have speculated that this happens behind closed doors. It has been leaked out at Nebraska. 6 to 10 different sites sharing it. Declared for the draft. Mock drafts are all screwed up. McCord's number 1. Yeah. I
So
don't think
Devin is a big time Syracuse fan. If anybody watching sees this,
yeah. So what Devin said is Kyle McCord declared for the 2025 NFL draft. Mock drafts are all screwed up now. Kyle going number 1. I don't know that he'll go number 1. He doesn't have
number
the
1 in the
pizzazz,
6th round.
but he certainly is a good game manager most of the time, except for that Pitt game. No offense, Devin. He played for Ohio State. He's got the pedigree at quarterback. It's not like he doesn't know how to play the game. He may be a better choice than Shador. He may be a better choice than Cam. I don't know. On the Nebraska topic, we were joking that obviously there's going to have to be conversation behind closed doors people don't want to have.
Right.
It got leaked out at Nebraska to the Nebraska media that with a couple of the receivers that have transferred out, we talked about Holgerson, no block, no rock. And he said to one of the receivers, I believe it's the guy that's at Oklahoma State now, he said, I saw your game. I saw how you block. I saw how you play. I have no use for you in my offense.
You got to be picky. You got to get the right kind of guy. You don't just go after stars.
And he didn't sugarcoat it. He just flat out told him, I have no use for you in my offense. So he's looking for big, physical, fast. And you to win the Big Ten, you're going to have to do something different than you've been doing at Nebraska because, it's grinded out, run the ball, whatever. They're going to have to find a way to make teams pay. And I think Holgerson is the key to that with the offense. Now, they've got a lot of great recruits. Didn't pick up any 5-stars allegedly, but they got the 5-star edge rusher that nobody wants to give a 5-star to now. And I'm like, how did that happen from Missouri? But I personally think they're in much better shape, Terry, from a coaching staff and a playing capacity.
Right.
Matt Rule did not mess with the transfer portal in year 1 or 2 the way he has this year. And I think he, like everybody else, has just figured out, I don't have to like it, but this is the way. And
even Dabo Swinney has dipped in there now.
Yeah, and the thing with Nebraska, just to complete the thought, and I want to get on to Auburn and to other teams.
Yeah.
They're also finishing a multi-million-dollar complex to have arguably the nicest, most updated, science-based, whatever facilities in the country. Right. And I shared that one video with you guys on the drone, and you could see the whole facility. Mm-hmm. That was 1/3 of the project, to give you an idea.
Excellent.
So there's going to be a lot of improvements at the University of Nebraska. I'm excited. The schedule's up, Terry. There is 10 wins on that schedule, probably 11. I told my buddy Will, the Penn State fan, Nebraska's going into Happy Valley. We're going to run the air raid. You're never going to have a chance to get the ball in your hands, and Nebraska's going to make it a red out instead of a white out. We're going to rule in Happy Valley next year.
And people think about, and you're talking about the school versus the football team, but I'll give you an example of why that matters. In Tuscaloosa, when Nick Saban walked onto campus, their stadium was smaller than Jordan-Hare. They had fewer seats, and now they're well over 100, and Auburn still doesn't have 90,000. Auburn had a bigger student body when Nick Saban walked onto campus in Tuscaloosa, but the football team has brought in a lot more students, and now there's more students in Tuscaloosa than Auburn. So it matters, and it's not just football.
Right. Yeah, and all boats rise with the tide. And when you start talking about people like Saban, there's a reason he's gone to the Hall of Fame. It's not just the on the field contributions; it's what he did off the field as well. But I absolutely agree with you. And I've said it. Nebraska is the football program is the reason the volleyball program exists, the basketball program exists, the wrestling program exists. It's the reason they can spend $100 million. It's stupid to me, Terry, but they came out with evaluations of how much each university is worth. The Nebraska Cornhuskers, 10 years have sucked. You know how bad they suck? $939 million. That's how bad they suck. number 9 or 8 on that list. That's how bad they suck. You got $939 million.
Put the butts in the seats.
Yep. And that's it. You got people like me, like Nebraska has done a very good job. Loyal fan base, die hard alumni, contribute to the school, continue to, wear the brand, build a brand, whatever. You don't see that everywhere. I joke with you about Alabama fans because, I love Nick Saban. That's why I watched Alabama football for 17 years.
Yeah.
16 because I didn't see him in 07. It started in 08. But I'm going to tell you what, Alabama football isn't nearly as fun to watch anymore as it used to be.
Right.
And, there's we have conference bowl comparison. You say you have a slide for this, Terry, in the notes.
I do, and let's take a look at it. So this is straight from the NCAA.com website. This is the current standings before the championship game. And Big Ten SEC, basically Big Ten beat the SEC in their head-to-head, and that's the difference here.
Yeah, and they ran away with it. They went 5-1 against the SEC this year.
Yeah, so SEC was 8-7, Big Ten 10-6. Obviously, the Big Ten can be 11-6 or 10-7, depending on what Ohio State does. Probably 11-6, but I'm going to piss off Notre Dame fans by saying that. But we'll talk about it. Obviously, ACC 2-11. That is
horrible.
That's rough.
Yeah.
4-0. The Independents are 4-0.
Yeah. And could be 5-0 before it's all said and done.
That leans heavily toward Notre Dame with that 4-0.
Correct. I don't know. We might have a discussion later about this national championship game. Who knows?
Oh, it could. I mean, I got to tell you, Notre Dame, I picked. So I am no longer perfect in the college football pick'em because I picked everything perfect up to the semifinals, but I picked Penn State over Notre Dame. But on the show last week, I said in the bracket, I picked Penn State to win this. But now that I'm seeing them on the field, I picked Notre Dame because Notre Dame, to me, is playing better than I thought they would in the playoffs.
Yeah, and there's good reasons for that, and we'll talk about it when we preview the game.
Right.
29-16, in case you wondered, Terry. I know you didn't ask. That's where I'm at right now. 29-16 in the Capital One Bowl pick'em. I also, like Terry, initially in my pick'em would pick something, or even on the show, I would pick something different. I never was consistent, so I've got to do better next year about if I pick them on the Capital One Bowl game, I'm going to pick them on the show. So, anyway.
So, one thing I'll point out before I take this slide down, the American, it was 6-2 in their bowl game this year.
Yep. Yeah, they did awesome. Mountain West didn't do good.
Especially with Army and Navy being in the American Conference now.
Yep, the MAC did fine,
Right.
But yeah, the Pac-12 had one game. Ugh, brutal. Yeah. I mean, it is what it is. So, anyway, I think, obviously everybody's the storyline was the Big Ten and the
SEC. Yeah.
And the SEC, but I want everybody to understand, and I think people do. This is about money. This is about television rights. This is about viewership. This is about participation. I mean, you're going to pay $4 million to watch as I said last week, 500 teams play in Yankee Stadium, Terry. That's crazy. It's crazy. But that's what the game paid. So
but we need gimmick games like that. We need Yankee Stadium. We need Fenway. We need a really stupid-looking mascot going in a giant toaster. That's what we need for these games. We don't need some generic game with two teams we haven't seen all year in Mobile with nothing fun.
Right. And that's kind of the thing, but it's all about money. And so for people saying, oh, there's too many bowl games, guess what? They're not going to cut them down. They're never going to reduce the number of bowl games. You might even get more.
Right.
So, and that is until they restructure the NCAA, which Terry's been calling for. Believe it or not, 2 years we've been doing this. Terry has said there's too many teams in the NCAA. He's been very consistent about that. So,
I mean, we're going to have 150 teams within a few years. It's crazy.
So one thing that we admit often on this show, Terry, is we got it wrong. This is from memory, and it's just a few teams that are not in the championship.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna give you a team name, and you and I will just briefly give our 10-second thought on it.
Okay.
Up first, the mighty Alabama, who under Nick Saban, the Hall of Famer, won 6 national titles, 10 SEC titles, sent 50 players to the Pro Bowl, and did not lose or did not win less than 10 games save for the first season.
Mm-hmm.
Kellen DeBoer, 9-4, lost to Michigan in his bowl game, lost games he probably should have won. Let's talk about Vandy. South Carolina nearly beat them, lost to Tennessee, and got whooped by Oklahoma.
Right.
And physically got dominated by Michigan. I told you Alabama would be a playoff team. I was incorrect. I admit that I was incorrect. I personally think, and I just want your feedback, I think the coaching change had far more of an impact than what we anticipated.
Yeah, I think obviously there's questions about Milroe looking back over the season. Was he in a better situation when Saban was there? And then when DeBoer took over, maybe he didn't have that benefit. Because even when it came to the bowl game, I said Milroe will be the difference and Alabama will win. Well, Milroe may have been the difference and they may have lost because he is not the guy that threw that game-winning touchdown against Auburn last year in the Iron Bowl. Different guy.
4th and 31, go home. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and Isaiah Bond was the one that caught it, and he was dropping passing like crazy the other day in the semifinals. So anyway,
yes, he was. Yeah, you and I agree there. I think Alabama is an undisciplined football team. I think Nick Saban's cachet cost him some players, cost him some recruits, cost him, you people like Ryan Williams that are diehard Alabama guys, they're not going to leave, contrary to what the message boards may think. The wide receiver at 17 years old, as everyone reminds you. But I think that Alabama, we just assumed, you and I both said that nobody wants Nick Saban's job after 17 years and what he did at Alabama.
right.
48 hours later, Kalen DeBoer had his job. And Kalen DeBoer honestly was given the keys to a Ferrari.
Right.
And should not have ever looked back. 9-4 is unacceptable in Tuscaloosa. Am I out of school when I say that?
I agree, but I want to give you a parallel here.
No, I was asking a question is the way I meant to say that.
No, I said, yeah, I agree.
Because you live in Alabama. For Alabama fans, is 9-4 an unacceptable finish?
For the fans, they will say yes. But I think reality is they could be at risk of doing the same thing they did after Bear Bryant left and hold new coaches to too high of a standard and never be satisfied with a winning coach. Now, they got lucky to get Saban. Obviously, there was some luck involved, but they are Alabama, so they were able to do that. Other teams weren't even going to get lucky to get him. So lightning struck twice in Tuscaloosa. The problem is you cannot expect it to strike a third time.
Right. Right. My thought process is Kalen DeBoer is so different than Nick Saban.
Yeah.
That had a much greater impact than what we ever thought. Staying with the SEC, Missouri does not make the playoff. I stood on business, as the kids say, Terry, and told you Missouri was a great football team and they would make the playoff. You agreed Missouri was a great football team, but weren't sure that they could make the outside. You thought they'd be the last one in if they had a chance.
Right.
They let us both down this year, I think, Terry, because we liked watching Missouri play football and felt like they were just under recruited. They just didn't have the athletes.
Right.
After watching Missouri a second year and doing the show with me, what do you think now?
I think that they They were decent, but there were questions about could they be the same team losing the running back from a year ago.
Yeah, the
And I don't know
all-purpose
if that
back who
I
ran
don't know if
everything.
that
Yeah.
yeah, and that's why people kept doubting Missouri last year, and they were underdogs and they would win games. And Missouri was decent, but they just didn't have that this year. And I tell you, it's easy in a conference like the Big Ten or a conference like the SEC to barely lose a whole bunch of football games.
100%.
And I think
100%.
a little bit of difference, and then you're going to lose two or three more games. And I think
Yep.
that's what happened with Missouri.
Defending national champion Michigan. We agreed that the new coach is not Jim Harbaugh. He proved he's not Jim Harbaugh.
Right.
But beat both Alabama and Ohio State to conclude the season. Sherrod Moore, right? I think that's his name.
Right. Yeah.
He's got a lot of recruits coming in, but he's lost some guys. Thoughts on that?
To me, Michigan was grittier than I expected them to be. I think they did not have the talent to be a top-notch team, although they beat some very good teams. Their style of play won them some football games.
Gotcha. I agree with that. Physicality, grind them out, score when you can, be
Right.
opportunistic. Picking up the pace a little bit. Arizona State, you and I completely overlooked them. Didn't think they had a
That's with
prayer.
everybody.
It wasn't just us. This is a team that went 3-9 last year, I believe it was,
Yeah.
and they made the playoff with a Big 10 or Big 12 championship. So we were wrong.
Right. They got better as the year went. They had Scatterboo, but they didn't just have Scatterboo. Their quarterback was pretty fantastic and came through a lot too.
Yeah, and I think the university's invested in that very young coach because he's 33, 34 years old,
Oh
and
yeah.
they've already allowed him to sign the offensive and defensive coordinators are signed to 3-year
Right.
deals. So, very impressive. Oklahoma State and the man did not win a conference game, Terry.
I think he cut off his mullet and it affected his football team.
So you got a Samson issue down there in Stillwater.
That is what's going on in Stillwater. He needs to grow that bitch back. Go buy some beat up truck and drive that thing to practice every day, and they'll be back.
And maybe have a few beers on the way home
On the
as
way,
he's
because
pulling into the
it's not a big
property.
deal because he does that, right?
Yeah. He doesn't drink and drive. And he might need to fix the air conditioning during a press conference. We love Mike Gundy, though, seriously. But
I
that
love it.
team completely underperformed. And you talk about missing the mark. It wasn't just us. Everybody
Oh yeah.
had Oklahoma State at the top of the Big 12, and they finished dead last.
They basically
So,
traded with Arizona State.
correct. Utah, 7-year quarterback Cam Rising has not determined whether he'd go back or not. I'm very high on Utah because of Kyle Whittingham, the program.
2 years of disappointment for you there. I mean,
But
you've
it's
been
been
picking
bad, yeah.
God,
I'm not
but
picking
it's
Utah
injury.
next year. Yeah. That's the one bad thing is it's injury after injury after injury. So, anyway. Biggest disappointment of the year, possibly Florida State. All the fanfare, came in ranked number 10 in the country, lose the first game out to Georgia Tech, and they finished 2-10 after an undefeated regular season, an ACC championship, and a snub in the bowl game.
Mhm.
And then they got their asses whipped by Georgia 63-3.
So the question is, they obviously have talent. I mean, there's no way that they don't have talent on that roster. What is the missing piece? Is it leadership from the coaching staff? Is it leadership from inside the roster? Probably a lack of a lot of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Just weren't working as a team to do the right things to win football games.
Yeah, it was ugly. That's why I mean, I don't have like you, Terry, because it doesn't sound like you have one either. I can't tell you why they lost so many games.
I mean, it's like somebody had mentioned something about the Golden State Warriors earlier, and it's kind of like that. They had this all-star roster, but you got to be a team, and they didn't seem like a team.
Right. Agreed. Um, oh, there's my note. I was going to say up next, Florida. Billy Napier retains his job, which I, in a very loud, clear voice, said there's no way that they're going to keep this guy. So Billy Napier, head coach, will be back next year. Got a very good recruiting class, has a good transfer class. Showed up again at the end of the season there, Terry, after taking that big L to Miami.
Right.
Oh, we got to talk about him too in just a second. Coach Prime as the Dallas Cowboys potential head coach makes me laugh. But anyway, Florida. How shocked are you by the result in Florida, knowing that when we previewed the season, they had to play UCF, Miami, Florida, and then Florida State, and then the SEC schedule?
And it was one of the tougher SEC schedules, comparatively speaking. We
Correct.
talk about Texas did well all year, but they played the lower part of the league. Florida did not. Florida played a tough schedule all the way through, probably the toughest schedule in the country. And they found a way to win some games we didn't think they had a chance in. And looking forward, you got DJ Lagway down there about to be the quarterback, and it's looking good for Florida, and they're going to be ranked pretty high heading into next year.
Yep. Indiana.
That's a tough one because their style of play won them some football games. They're very consistent, but when they played the big games, they were overmatched against
Yep.
the cream of the crop.
Well, and he had all those transfers from James Madison,
Hmm.
and it showed that they were from James Madison. And what I
Right.
mean by that is they just got outclassed athletically. They got beat up and they got
Yeah.
outclassed. And he's an arrogant shithead.
Yeah. Nick Saban said, I didn't teach you that.
Yeah, that was hilarious. I mean, but he's a jerk off. So
Yeah.
if that's how he wants to be, that's how he wants to be. You can tell Signetti's got a big chip on his shoulder. Last one, because they're always in the hunt, the Georgia Bulldogs.
That's a tough one because Carson Beck won a lot of football games at Georgia. And then I guess he was injured and did not play extremely well this year. They had a good defense, but they
Always.
just weren't that top level team that the SEC needed them to be to compete. And, they beat Texas twice, which
Yep.
shows that they're capable. But that really, to me, was a litmus test for SEC versus everybody else was Georgia. Um, Carson Beck was injured for the playoffs, so they had the backup in, but I don't think Carson Beck toward the end of the year, and it may have been injury or whatever, but if he had not been injured and out, I still don't think Georgia's going to win that football game just because he wasn't at his best this year at all.
No, multiple games with 3 interceptions isn't going to get
Yeah.
the job done. And um, even so, he declared for the draft. Carson Beck did. Then he undeclared for the draft. Had a do not contact tag, and he has now
Right.
signed a $4 million NIL with the Miami Hurricanes, which I know you love as much as I do.
Right. This seems to be their pattern. Somebody declares for the draft, and then they end up at Miami.
Yeah, $4 million to play quarterback at the U.
And then he's not even going to be able to do spring training because he can't even throw a football till April.
Correct. Insanity, that kind of money. Also,
Yes.
just to mention a couple coaches real quick, Terry. Tom Allen, defensive coordinator for Penn State, had a great year again. Dabo's going after him for the Clemson DC. And I don't have to remind you probably, but just for our listeners, if you're unfamiliar, Dabo Swinney won 2 national championships. He had the benefit of having Trevor Lawrence follow Deshaun Watson at quarterback. That's two pretty good quarterbacks, even if their NFL run does not show that. In college, they were God mode at Clemson. They had a big offensive line, a good running game, great receivers, and a defense that just harassed and annihilated teams, for the lack of a better way to say it. They also had Brent Venables. The missing component at Clemson has been a very active, blitzing, pass rush defense. Tom Allen definitely brings that, and we're going to talk about that in the semifinal football game here in a minute. It's very interesting, though, that the minute the game's over, Dabo's after him, Penn State defensive coordinator.
Yeah, I think Clemson's on the rise for sure. You better watch out because Dabo decided it's 2025, and he's going to start using the transfer portal. He's going after better coordinators. I think that's a team to watch. Especially
and as a reminder, Dabo has 2 national championships, has been at Clemson 15 years, I think it is now, 16 years, 2008. So 17 years?
Yeah.
I mean, he's been there forever. Right. Anyway, maybe not 17. Maybe it's 2011. Regardless, Dabo's been there for double digits. He's won 2 national titles. They won that string of ACC champions. I think it was 10 years in a row, Terry, because Florida State was not good. They won all those ACC championships. And the man is 54, 55, somewhere in there. He is not old. He's not near retirement age, and he can keep on coaching. So
interim head coach in October of 2008.
Okay. So he has been the Clemson man since October of 2008.
Right.
I remember because Nebraska played him in the Gator Bowl, and they beat him, but Nebraska beat Clemson. But that Clemson team was fast. Right. And that's always been one of their signatures is they're fast.
The thing is with Clemson and Dabo, Dabo did not start dominating immediately. It took a few years, and there's
he had Taj Boyd, and Taj Boyd got punched in the mouth by that Florida State team, and they never looked back, and they
showed some patience with him, and obviously he won a couple of national championships.
Yep, and he did it with a coordinator though, and I think that he has missed Venables, who's obviously the Oklahoma head coach. I think he's missed Venables, and I think he wants that style. And there is a reason, Terry, that he wants Tom Allen. Tom Allen's defense for Penn State helped get them to the dance that I believe we're ready to talk about.
Let's start it up. First thing we're going to talk about is Notre Dame and Penn State. And this was a heck of a football game. Notre Dame wins 27-24. Very good. Penn State, though, ran the ball well, but not a single receiver on Penn State's team had a reception.
Nope, just the tight end, number 44, and then the other tight end. But yeah, not a wide receiver. No wide receiver had a reception for Penn State. I guess the running backs had them too. And right. They're both running backs are committed to come back to Penn State next year. Just so you're aware. Pretty clean game. Very physically violent game. This was a great football game. Obviously, you can see Notre Dame bend, but they did not break. And that is Marcus Freeman coaching. That's Al Golden, defensive coordinators coaching. Mm-hmm. These guys know what they're doing to get the most out of their players. There's a couple mistakes that Riley Leonard made. Obviously, 2 turnovers, two interceptions. But this game was everything we thought it would be, Terry. 15-round prize fight to the very end. And
look at third down comparison here.
Yeah.
Notre Dame 11 of 17.
Yep.
To Penn State 3 of 11. That's crazy.
Yeah, and Al Golden confused Aller. They blitzed. They stopped. The run game, they had 200 yards. Okay, run 8 yards at a time. That's fine. But you're not getting in the end zone. And it was 0-0, and then it was 10-3, and it was 10-10, and then of course, ends up being 27-24. A lot of points scored in that fourth quarter. Defenses got tired, you could tell,
Right.
but Notre Dame had just enough to stop Penn State, and I believe they did a fake field goal that worked, and I mean, it's just the cards fell right for Penn State or for Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman. And there is a mindset. Now, everybody said, Notre Dame had an easy schedule, blah, blah, blah. They buzzsawed everybody like they were supposed to, with the exception
Right.
of Northern Illinois, that fluke game they lost to a non, I believe it's an FCS school. Or
I think
maybe a
they're
very,
back, maybe.
oh, maybe. Okay.
Yeah.
If they are, it doesn't matter. They're not a very good football team, allegedly not good enough to beat Notre Dame, but they did on that day, 16-14. And their defense showed out and showed up. But my point about Notre Dame is that with Marcus Freeman as the head football coach, there is a toughness mentality that they have. So when they played Indiana, they beat Indiana up. When they played Boise, they beat Boise up. Or no,
Right.
that was Penn State. Notre Dame played who did they play last? Georgia. They
Georgia.
beat up on Georgia.
That's
And
right.
when they played Penn State, they played physical football. So the question of does Notre Dame belong has been answered. They
Right.
100% were rightfully in this tournament, in this playoff. Penn State has gone back to can James Franklin win the big one. He won 2 playoff games. He beat SMU, and he beat Boise State,
Mhm.
but they did not beat Notre Dame. When you are evenly matched up, pound for pound, talent for talent, pretty even football game, Terry, once again, Penn State can't win the big one.
Yeah, and their record, I mean, James Franklin's record at Penn State against top 5 teams. I know top 5 is a tough thing to ask, but he's gonna play a lot of top 5 teams while he's at Penn State, is not very good at all. I'm not sure of the details. It's like 1 and
1-16,
yeah, something like that.
and then 3-19 or something over top 15, something weird.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, I I think that Penn State's going to do some more retooling. I don't think James Franklin is in any jeopardy, but both of us
No.
have been at schools. We're both alumni of schools that fired winning coaches.
Mhm.
Mine did it twice. They fired Frank Solich
Right.
at 57-19, and they fired Bo Pelini at 67-27.
Right.
Or no, Solich was 58-19. That's even worse. So, there's a lot of football that you win to be fired, Terry, and to be fired on for Solich a 10-3 season with a
Mhm.
bowl win,
Right.
and for Pelini a 10-3 season with a bowl win.
Yeah,
So
Gus got fired after the weird COVID year, and he got 6 conference wins that year.
yeah, when it was only conference and
It was
SEC.
only conference, and he had a winning record.
Yeah. So point being that I don't know that James Franklin is going to lose, but that's why I told my buddy Will today. I said, look, Bo Pelini won every game he was supposed to win. Again, and he went 67-27. It's a 730 win-loss record or 710 win-loss record.
Mhm.
They fired him on a winning season. It does happen. I don't know that it'll happen to James Franklin.
I don't think so, not right now, but it is, he does need to do something because you gotta figure that out.
Yep. And Nebraska is the 11th game of the season next year for Penn State. So that Dana Holgerson offense
Mhm.
will be flying by game 11. Those some of those teams are teams you want to draw in game 1, Terry. You don't want to draw in
Right.
game 11.
So Penn State apparently is one of Cyrus's favorite teams.
Oh, because of the
So,
Lion?
I don't know. He was playing some, football video game. He would be different teams or whatever. Apparently, he developed a liking of Penn State.
Well, there you go.
Let's talk about the other game, and that was Ohio State, Texas. And the score says 28-14, but Texas was in the red zone looking to tie it up at 21, and there was a turnover, and it became 28-14. So this game was a lot closer. It didn't feel like Texas was going to do it, honestly, the whole time. It felt like Ohio State had it, even though it was very close and it was almost tied. It felt like Ohio State was in control.
Jack Sawyer strip sack ball game.
Yeah.
Captain Jack, as they call him there in Buckeye Nation. And what was it, 85 or 88 yards or something? He ran it back for a damn touchdown.
I mean, they were the 10-yard line or something.
Yeah, he was out of gas. But Texas, here's my problem with Texas. And I don't criticize Sark because I love Steve Sarkisian. You have Arch Manning on your team. It is 1st and goal from inside the 3. You have 4 downs to get the touchdown. Yeah. You go into shotgun and eat a 5 or 6 yard sack. And all of a sudden, you're backed up. And then you do another passing play and then you get blindsided by this blitzing defense of the Buckeyes, and they never took the foot off the gas. The defense of Ohio State never slowed down. And the game was a little sloppy, but it was fairly even across the board.
Neither team was really running the ball well. I mean, 370 total yards to 341. This was definitely a defensive game. 28-14 is a lot of points for what this game was.
Yeah. Well, and it was, you talk about physical. This was a physical, hard hitting, very, very dialed in football game. And, Ohio State scored pretty quick. They were up 14-0, and it looked like, oh, hell, here comes the avalanche.
Right.
But Texas, to their credit, fought back and was able to even it up in the third. But that fourth quarter, I mean, they put the dagger in them there at Ohio State, and it was the defense that got the job done. It wasn't the offense. It wasn't Will Howard. It wasn't number 4. Because he got bracketed all night long. He was double and triple covered. They were so concerned about him that it opened up the other game for other players. So that's something Freeman's probably going to note in his game plan against Ohio State with Notre Dame. But I think this was a fantastic football game. I think it was 2 fantastic football games.
Absolutely.
Everybody on this show knows I'm not an Ohio State fan. Right. I'm not a Notre Dame fan. But I love football, and these were good football games.
And Ohio State is a different team than they were during the regular season. People keep complaining about Ohio State. Like, Oregon had to play Ohio State. And it's like, well, you know what? That's because Ohio State was ranked lower because they had not played like this up until it was playoff time. But they showed up.
Yeah, and they avalanched Tennessee, avalanched Oregon. That defense kept coming against Texas. Do they have one more in them? That's the question that we're going to preview.
All right, so here's the situation. We saw Notre Dame beat Penn State in the Orange Bowl. Ohio State beat Texas in the Cotton Bowl. And we got one game left, the national championship. Anyway, Notre Dame, Ohio State, national championship game. These are 2 good defenses. They focus on toughness in their lines. Notre Dame's a little bit better at grabbing the turnovers. Otherwise, they stack up pretty much the same.
And that's the one unique thing that we have found, Terry, once you got to the quarterfinals. These games really started to match pretty even teams. So maybe there was some method to the madness of the selection committee. I will say this, Notre Dame gives up a few more points, gives up a few more yards, but the turnover margin may be where they win this football game.
Right.
Not talking about statistically, I'm talking about, does Ohio State Will Howard commit a fumble or an interception? Does he make the mistake that Notre Dame can make him pay for? And Riley Leonard in that offense. Who knows? Who knows? But I think at the end of the day that Notre Dame, Ohio State, it's going to be another fight. They're both sore. They're both tired. They're both injured a little bit. I will never, ever, ever root for Ohio State to win a national championship. And I know that you picked them for your bracket. So Notre Dame by a field goal over the Buckeyes for the national championship. The first since 1988 or 89, whenever Lou Holtz was there. Just to rub it in Ryan Day's face some more so we can talk about that next week.
So a couple of weeks ago, after Ohio State whipped Tennessee, and then after Ohio State whipped Oregon in the rematch, I thought nobody's going to come close to Ohio State. But Texas was right there. I know it ended up a 2-touchdown game, but it was very close to being tied late in the game in the fourth quarter.
Yep.
I think Notre Dame is playing better than Texas has been playing. So that makes me wonder. This is, to me, this is not going to be Ohio State with a cakewalk over Notre Dame. But I think Ohio State still has enough in them to win this. And realistically, I'm thinking a field goal, 4 points, something like that.
Spread is 9.5.
I just don't.
Just for your information.
I just don't see them beating them that bad.
I don't either. I mean, I get that Notre Dame didn't play the same type of schedule, didn't play 3 top 5 opponents that Ohio State played this year. But they have done everything they were supposed to do, with the one exception of losing to Northern Illinois. And they didn't play in a conference championship, but guess what? Neither did Ohio State. So does it matter?
Right.
So they've had the same amount of games, same amount of play, same amount of opportunity. This is as even as you can get. But I refuse to pick Ohio State, so give me Notre Dame. And that is nearly as painful, but Marcus Freeman makes it easier. So because I like him a lot. But that's where I'm at, Terry. I'm going with Notre Dame.
Storyline too.
Plus, we have to disagree about something.
Right. Well, I mean, that's also a good storyline with Marcus Freeman going up against Ohio State for national championship. I mean, they're really going to play on that until this game happens, and that's huge. So we'll see. I think it's going to be another hard-nosed game, probably not very high scoring. I'm thinking more like a 28-24 Ohio State, something like that.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to be we're off to the races.
Right.
This isn't one of your light the scoreboard games up, Terry. Check the bulbs. Pay the power bill. This isn't one of those. I don't think. Because neither team has allowed an equal opponent to do that. So, like I said, I'm going with Notre Dame.
All right. So it comes down to this one game. And the bracket challenge, guess what? Comes down to this one game. There's somebody named Wilson. I don't know who this is. I hope you're a listener and not just somebody that saw a bracket to get in on ESPN. If Ohio State wins, I win the bracket challenge. If Notre Dame wins, Wilson wins the bracket challenge.
Go Wilson, because I picked Notre Dame too. There's one bracket just because I was screwing around having fun. I picked all the underdogs, and I did not get very many points, Terry. I picked Boise to win the national championship. Little fantasy booking. That did not happen.
Sure. It's been a fun season, and we got, I don't know, are we going to do one show to end it next week, or are we going to do an extra show at the end? What do you think? We've
I was
talked about putting
telling our
polls
audience
out.
while you were talking that this is probably one of our last football shows until the spring, if
Yeah,
not a little later. We'll go back to the hour to hour 15, hour 20 format on the other show, as we call
right.
it, our other top 10. Still need ideas for ranking and all that, so please DM us, text us. Don't email Terry. If you've watched our show or listen, you get the joke. Don't email Terry. But in all seriousness, we appreciate all of the fans, Terry, and all of the listeners. I call them fans, but that's because we're football people. But listeners, people that participate in this show, it's been a great season. And believe it or not, buddy, after next week, this season 2, this is 2 years of football talk together and how
Right.
much all of that has changed. But honestly, I think we can probably do one show next week.
And just wrap up football.
Well, yeah, because it's a national championship.
Yeah, I think it's review of the national championship and final thoughts, and maybe a way too early top 10.
Yeah. But I mean, that we could put in with our other show. And we certainly appreciate all of the fun we've had, sans the technical difficulties. I was reminding our audience, Terry, that I used to have the slowest computer in the world, so that you managed to go through that. So every once in a while, when you're a good teammate, I was also telling them that this is your vision, your idea. You really put these things together. I do notes and research, and I come on and make an ass of myself, but this is your baby. So what I was suggesting before you went off was we may only do one show. I don't know if
Yeah,
we have enough to do 2 shows, but I don't know that we have to make that decision right now because we're
right.
not recording until after
We don't
next
make
month.
decisions until it's like, I mean, when we come up with these polls, it is very last minute.
And ladies and gentlemen, I can assure you, we are not doing a show next week because we will be watching the national championship game.
That's true. It definitely will not be on Monday.
It will not be Monday. That's what I meant when I said we're not doing a show next week. It
Right.
will not be a week from today. That we know. And
That
it won't
being
be
said,
Sunday because we're going to talk about the game.
that's right. And that being said, thanks for waiting on me. Thanks anybody that hung in there. I don't know that anybody's here watching us anymore after that. But to end this show and to move along to what's coming in this week, let me go ahead and wrap it up and tell you be a champ this week in everything that you do. See you next time, everybody.